Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to another episode of Connect with the Quran. And we are going to be looking at Surah Anfaal today. So if it's fine, I'd just like you to listen to a recording of it, of the first few ayahs. So Bismillah.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يسألونك عن الأنفال قل الأنفال لله والرسول فاتقوا الله وأصلحوا ذات بينكم وأطيعوا الله ورسوله إن كنتم مؤمنين إنما المؤمنون الذين إذا ذكر الله وجلت قلوبهم وإذا تليت عليهم آياته زادتهم إيمانا وعلى ربهم يتوكلون الذين يقيمون الصلاة ومما رزقناهم ينفقون أولئك هم المؤمنون حقا لهم درجات عند ربهم ومغفرة ورزق كريم وألف بين قلوبهم لو أنفقت ما في الأرض جميعا ما ألفت بين قلوبهم ولكن الله ألف بينهم إنه عزيز حكيم
So that was a beautiful first few ayahs of Surah Anfaal. And we'll just go through a few of those, and I'll give you a bit of a synopsis of the whole surah, the background and where it's coming from and so on. But I always like to sort of backtrack and take you all the way back to, in terms of grouping, where we started from. There was a first group which was made of Surah Al-Fatiha, Surah Baqarah, Al Imran, Surah Nisa and Surah Maida. That formed one group of surahs. This is one way of looking at it. One Mufassir, they break it up because, every time you have a bit of a overview of the full Quran, then because like we said, they're divided into Makki surahs, Madani surahs, and so each group has one or two of one Makki and one or two of the Madani. Sometimes it's just one of Makki and the whole series of Madani and vice versa. So that's the kind of thing that we have. So in the first one, Surah Fatiha was a Makki surah, all the other four were Madani, and we went through the bit of you can consider it like a seerah, or about, what aspects of coming into Medina, the fledgling society, how it got together. So that was on the group one. Then we started now in a group two, where we had it from Surah, if I'm not mistaken, we had it from Surah An-Nam, Surah Araf, which is Surah 6 and Surah 7, and now we are into Surah 8, which is Surah Anfaal and Surah Tawbah. So here Anam and Araf make a pair, and they are considered the Makki surahs, and these two which we're going to do today and in the next episode is Surah Tawbah. These are the Madani one. So this is again back to a bit of a seerah. The first two were talking more on dawah, and the beautiful thing there was that we were called the Ala Illah, the ayat of Ala Illah, which comes from Fabi'ayyi Ala Rabbikuma Tukazziban, on the favors of Allah. So Surah An'am encaptured various way of talking to us so that we are in splendor, in awe of the benefits of the endless ni'mas, of the endless favors Allah has given us. So that was encapsulated in that surah. sometimes through the concept of nature, telling us about nature, and we did that. And then in Surah Araf, it's called Ayyamillah, the days of Allah. And in that, in a sense, it's referring more, okay, historically, but also the awesome, the fearful moments of Ayyamillah. And so we were discussing those prophets, which, they didn't take heed, and so then there was they were taken to task. So those are the days of what happened to the people of Hud, of Thamud, of Lut, and so on. So that was encaptured. So, and it is a way of doing dawah. This is because it's a Makki phase still. So in the Makki phase, you were just trying to be polite, inviting people kindly, nicely in that way, and then also then warning them. So because Surah Araf, then you the first thing you say, our Rasul is also Bashirun wa Nazir, and it's like he's a Bashira, the giver of good tidings, and also the warners. That's all his job is. That the fact that then people don't take heed, our Rasul was told, then don't worry about them. Your job is just to convey the message. So that was in Surah Anam and Araf. Now we are into Surah Anfaal and At-Tawbah, and these are two back to Madani surahs. And like in the two Madani surahs of Baqarah and Al Imran, we discussed, we had the discussion around Surah Baqarah pre-battle, Surah Badr pre-battle, and Al Imran was a post-battle on Battle of Uhud. Here again, we're going to that sort of thing is going to play out a little bit, because Surah Anfal is a post-battle of Badr. In Surah Baqarah, we had a pre-battle of Badr, a preparation of people, what you must do. I love that ayah which says that don't think that the people who are shaheed, it's ayah 154 if I'm not mistaken, that don't think that the people who have died in the cause as a shaheed in the battle, in the cause of Allah, that they are dead. No, they're not dead, but you don't perceive it. That was what came in there in Surah Baqarah. In Al Imran, because it was a post-battle Uhud where there were a lot of shaheed, and we let it, there it comes, don't even think that they are dead, because they're in a good place and they're with Allah. So those are just to show you the parallels that come from one surah to the other, and how they kind of either complete a story that started, a topic that started like on the battles, and it finishes there. So here in Anfal, we've got a post-battle of Badr thing, and this is the commentary. And and now you can relate it to Al Imran, because in Al Imran it was post-Uhud commentary, and here it is post-Badr, which was a more victorious battle, and we will come back to it. So let me just go back and say the word Anfal of the surah takes its cue from it's the plural of the word nafil. So there are two plurals for nafil. We have anfal or nawafil, and it means extra, over and above. That's why when we talk about our salah as a nafil salah, it's the over and above salahs. And Ghanima is also another word which is used for spoils of war, because this surah is often translated as spoils of war. But this is just extra, because they didn't go into the battle of Badr with any intention, with any other agenda other than safeguarding Allah's faith and Allah's deen. That's why they went. It was 300 people against 1,000 people with minimum arsenal, with minimum armaments, and yet Allah granted them this victorious moment. So this surah now starts with asking that they are asking you what is they ask you about what is the what's going to happen with these with the booty that we won now. What do we do about that? And so it starts with yasalunaka anil anfal, that they are asking you concerns about the booty that has come together. And so they say the spoils and are the disposal of Allah and the Messenger. So have taqwa for Allah, wattaqullah, and waslahu, and keep straight the relationships between yourself. Obey Allah and His Messenger if you believe. This is the very first ayah of Surah An'am. And what this does is it's really in a way also reprimanding the Muslims right away, saying that don't worry about the spoils of war. That's not what you went into the battle for. It's all for Allah and His Rasul. And also maybe because people were starting to say, what am I going to get out of this? You know, that we've just now conquered the Quraysh with so many of their booty, that they left maybe their arsenal. So who gets what? Later in the surah, at about ayah 40, Allah does then say, this is the distribution, 1/5 for Allah and His Rasul. So in other words, it's for charity, and the others you divide this way to the people who took part in the battle. That comes much later, but that's a nitty-gritty, a fiqh thing. I don't want to get into that. I just want to share with you how Allah immediately first takes us to task. You know, He often does that. He says, get your priorities straight. Why did you come into this? So then what we get into it is that it talks about the Battle of Badr in detail, but it also talks about it in the history, because this was the first battle that we came into Medina, of how, you know, there were the Aus, the Khazraj, that now we have the Muhajirs, they're coming in. So, but between the Aus and Khazraj, it wasn't like we were a unified community. There are many dynamics, and of course there are things too. So the first thing we need to do is be at peace with each other, be in unity. So those kind of things that come up as well. And it's beautiful because it starts in the second ayah when it talks about that, O believers are those who, when Allah is mentioned, this is what we should have. What happens to their skin or what happens to their heart? It's wajilat qulubuhum. There's a tremor in their heart, and when they hear His signs rehearsed, they find their strength is only, their faith is only strengthened, and they put their trust in Allah. And from here on, the next one, and then it tells you who it is. It's yuqimuna salata wa mimma razaqnahum yunfiqun, and who spend out of what we give them, and who establish salah. And this in a nutshell is kind of giving you what a moment is meant to be and how it is, how we are. So the true believers are those people, and in a way it contains what the personality of a true believer is and how it should be. So this will, inshallah, then look at the beauty of how the surahs are also put together. This is at the very beginning of the ayah, the ayah 2 of these are the kind of people that exist, and then towards the end, at the second last surah, ayah of Surah Anfaal, we start getting what kind of people are they, and it's like a bringing together. If you had a bit of skirmishes between yourselves towards the end of the surah, it tells you this is the kind of people we are looking for, and this is what the community is based on. So this is where this surah is going with it. In between, you can get a bit of history that, this gives you what happened as a start of the battle, as a first shock for the Quraysh. And now in the second half, as we come back, we will go into how it was such a setback for the Quraysh, and we've done this in Surah Baqarah also, how between that time and to the time of the conquest of Makkah, what actually unfolds, and what is the psychology of the Quraysh when they are seeing these things unfold. For somebody who they thought were good for nothing, they were the downtrodden of the community. So that's what we will get into the second half. So for the moment, we're going to take a break and then come back. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
وألف بين قلوبهم لو أنفقت ما في الأرض جميعا ما ألفت بين قلوبهم ولكن الله ألف بينهم إنه عزيز حكيم إنه عزيز حكيم.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome back. So now I had you hear a little, a single ayah towards the very end of the surah, which I absolutely love, because it talks about And I would love to go through it with you a little bit because it's about Allah fabayna, that Allah is the one who puts a heart. So we were just talking about what happens to the Quraysh, and I'll get into that history. But before that, just to bring it, that the second ayah was talking about encapsulating what Muslims are like and what they're supposed to be, and that they feel the tremor of their hearts when Allah's name is being mentioned, and may it be so for us too. So, and it's on Wajilat. And now when we are towards the tail end, the very last ayah, which I'm not going to have go through right now, I prefer this one, ayah 63, which is on Allah fabayna qulubihim. And what this is saying, it's saying that Allah has put affection between the hearts of the people, Allah fabayna qulubihim, between their hearts. And had you la anfaqta ma fil ardi jamia, had you spent everything, jamia, everything that's in the heaven and the earth, you wouldn't be able to put the love in their hearts. You know, like when we say that, give them a gift and that will soften their hearts to you. And so Allah is saying you could have spent the whole world, but you can't soften their hearts. But ma allafta bayna qulubihim. But Allah has you could not have produced that affection, but Allah has produced that affection. So وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ أَلَّفَ بَيْنَهُم, but Allah has put the and He is innahu azizun hakim. So the beauty of this ayah is a few things. So in first place, it's talking about going back in history about the people of Medina and on the booty, and that we want who wants more, who wants less. So in first place, also other things beyond that. But that's just in a nutshell one aspect of where this surah ayah is coming from. Many people extrapolate from this, and I did also ask a scholar about it. I said, can we not read it, because it's talking about Allah fabayna qulubihim, putting love between people's hearts. So can't you be talking about spouses? Can't you be talking about wherever there's acrimony between me and my siblings, or me and my in-laws, and this and that? Can we not consider this ayah as a dua to be read? So they said, no, it's a good one, you can do it, but you know, you must also remember which are the authentic du'as from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and if he made that, and you know, so those are better. But this, if this gives you solace just to read this of Allah fabayna qulubihim la anfaqta ma fil ardi jamia ma allafta bayna qulubihim walakin Allah allafa baynahum, but Allah put it in innahu azizun hakim. So this is the beauty of this ayah, which in a way also for me encapsulates what this surah is talking about you have a good victory, you have at a good place, but you know, hearts need to be kept together, and hearts only come together by Allah's grace, and He puts it in. So yes, we do have the sunnah in our life, in our tradition, that we must be giving gifts to each other, and many more things of that sort, of being kind to each other, and that creates love. But at the end of the day, it's by Allah's grace, and everything goes back. You know, even when we start the surah, and we started with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, I just want to bring it in about the one who's the most merciful and the mercy giving, the extremely merciful and the constantly merciful. And I like those translations better than when they say the compassionate and the beneficent. Beneficent isn't even a word we use in our vocabulary so often, and yet that's how we often get it translated. So the whole point of Connect with the Quran is try to take what really resonates for you in the deepness of your heart. And this again also at that. So while we give you the historical background, the fact that, you know, we started with, and I do love to go into the historical detail also to give you that while in Surah Araf we talked about, you know, the punishments that the other communities got, Hud, Samud, the people of Hud, the Ad, the Thamud, and the Lut, and so on. That is the sunnah of Allah, that if you don't listen, you've got a messenger with you, you don't have him, so then you're going to face the consequences on earth and even in the akhirah. Here with the Quraysh, it's been a special case. They've been told and warned about the same punishment they'll get, but here the punishment of being deprived of the status of being the Quraysh of Makkah and holding it that as a central place, just losing that status quo that's taken away from them, that in itself was a big enough punishment, and they sort of mended their way because of the conquest of Makkah, which we will talk about in the next episode with Surah Tawbah. that in itself is a punishment enough. So they got their punishment in the dunya in the form of you losing all power, and most 90% of them, 99% did eventually revert to being Muslims because they realized the value of it. But the few that they didn't, then they were also taken to task, and whatever happened to them happened to them. But the point being that between the first setback for the Quraysh, which was the Battle of Badr, which we are talking about in Surah Anfaal, to all the way to the much later, and I'll give you the dates next time, of the conquest of Makkah, there were skirmishes, slow things were beginning to happen. That because I think it was in the second Hijri when we had the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, and now Muslims, because we were in Medina, there was a bit more consolidation of situation, that the fact that the Quraysh had to come to the party and talk to Rasulullah and have a treaty with him, because they were now running into trouble. They were seeing more and more people are becoming Muslim. So from the time of the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, which was like a peace treaty, that you're not going to attack us, we're not going to attack you, and so on, it allowed Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to send more people out for dawah, and that kind of mission started to happen. Then what happened also is that it was because the Quraysh, or one of their allies, broke the treaty, and there was a skirmish between them and one of the associates, the tribes of Medina, the allies of Medina, that's why then the treaty broke down, you rip it away, and the peace treaty, and then what happens is that we prepared for the conquest of Makkah. So those years of peace it's again for us to take heed of, for peace treaty, for dawah, give a reprieve to, warring tribes. We're always against the world. We're always whatever it is. Let things calm also. So those are the kind of backgrounds that come up in this surah as a take-home lesson. And it's just beautiful, but I loved the end of how just turn to Allah and find within Him, whether you want to call out Ya Wadud, the loving, you want to call out Ya Halim, Ya Kareem, whichever name of Allah resonates for you. And within the surah, maybe even just make it a homework that you mark out when it says Innahu Azizun Hakim. What is the significance of Him being the Aziz, the mighty, and yet then the full of wisdom one too? So there I'd like to leave you pretty much with this surah of encapsulate, just to give you a glimpse, just to give you a love for the Quran, of how to want to connect wherever you are, whether you just want to know the names, what's happening, which are the Makki surahs, which are the Madani surahs, and so on. But this is where it is with Surah Tawbah, which we will do next time. We will finish this second series of a second group of these surahs, which were 2 Makki and 2 Madani. And inshallah, we'll just go a bit more into some historical background in Surah Tawbah. But for now, in Surah Anfaal, it's a post-Battle of Badr one. So it's telling you how to now behave. Even when you've won, you don't get a big head suddenly. And, you still need to remember taqwa, remember to be with Allah. So with there, I'll leave you, dear listeners. And I pray it was beneficial for you, as I hope it's, I have a take-home lesson too from it. And inshallah, till we meet next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.